Our first speaker tonight is Jason Holland. Jason is an organizer for Washington Public Employees Association. He's organizing some decertification attempts at several community colleges.
Yeah, fighting them.
Fighting them, yes. I know. Sorry. Let me repeat this. Let me restate this. He is organizing campaigns against right-wing, anti-union folks at some far-flung community colleges who are trying to decertify the union, probably with the help of the Evergreen Freedom Foundation. How's that more accurate about what's going on? He'll probably tell you more. But he's also a member of Organized Workers for Labor Solidarity, and he does a lot of driving for labor. So please welcome Jason.
All right, so my name's Jason. I thought first I could tell you a little bit about what I do, give you an introduction. I'm an organizer for WPEA. It's UFCW Local 365. We represent public sector employees at state agencies, libraries, and community colleges throughout the state. Before that, I was a research specialist for WPEA. I was involved in contract bargaining, special issues, pretty much everything that came up that wasn't direct member representation. And before that, I was an intern for the National Labor Relations Board in Little Rock, Arkansas. And that was quite an experience, but we'll leave that for another time. I'm also a union member. I'm a member of the Association of Professional Staff and a member of Organized Workers for Labor Solidarity, which quite a few of them are here today. It's a diverse group of rank-and-file union activists from various unions, and we work together to support workers often involved in labor disputes, not only to win the dispute, but to build solidarity among the workers and across union lines and bring some of that fighting spirit back to the local labor movement. Since I'm up first, I thought I would start out with a little bit of an overview, sort of frame the situation that we're in and why these different not traditional organizing methods, the fast food strikes, the CTAC minimum wage initiatives, why these are popping up. So, as you know, the last several years and currently have been very difficult for unions and union members. Union rates have been steadily declining for a long time now, and the only way for unions to make headway is to evolve and adapt and adjust to this new landscape. So part of this is the slew of right-to-work legislation. We're seeing a well-funded national push of these so-called right-to-work laws. And this has been going on for a while now. We've seen this in Michigan, we've seen this in Wisconsin, and traditionally blue labor states. And now we're even starting to see this in the Pacific Northwest. Right now, Washington is sort of sitting in a sandwich. And this is one of the big topics that us in the union are working on right now, and something that you all are going to be seeing in the near future. So Oregon has an initiative right now that they're looking at that would make paying dues optional for all public sector union employees. Yeah. And so this is a big going on down there in Oregon, and they decided, they're doing a lot of market research, and they're really testing and seeing what works and what doesn't, and they're finding that the public sector unions, they don't have a lot of support. One thing you often hear is, unions are good, but they shouldn't be in the public sector. And so these groups are playing on that, and they're introducing this sort of legislation, following the Wisconsin model, and right now it's in Oregon, one of the last places you would expect it. And at the same time in Alaska, they're trying to introduce the regular right-to-work legislation for both public and private sectors. So we're sitting here with one above, one below, and we know for a fact that this next legislative session, Michael Baumgartner, a politician out of Spokane, is going to drop some right-to-work legislation in this next session. We're expecting it, and one of the main things we're working on right now is developing a strategy to fight it. Another thing we're seeing is really nationwide a wave of decertification attempts, also from well-funded groups, probably the same people funding these organizations. So you have these groups like the Evergreen Freedom Foundation in Olympia, so we don't know if they're working with the groups trying to decert us for sure, but we have suspicions that somebody is working with them. It becomes quite obvious in reading their pleadings before the PERC board and watching the way they put their campaign together. So I've talked to people in other unions in other states, in Oregon, Wisconsin, and they're really seeing this wave of deserts as well. It's happening across the country this year. And it's really starting to catch some momentum. I mean, our union, we have 2 decertifications right now that are pending, that we're fighting and working on. In our staff, we can't remember the last time we had a decertification we had to fight. So we've got the right to work legislation, the decertification attempts, and at the same time, the unions are sort of hamstrung by labor law that makes it difficult for us to organize and difficult for us to strike. Some of the strongest tools that unions have in organizing in labor disputes are secondary boycotts and strikes. And right now, labor law prevents both secondary boycotts and allows for the permanent replacement of striking workers in certain situations. So the employers really have the law on our side, and as we've seen, where it's taken several years just to get appointments to the NLRB board, to fill the board, you know, the chances of getting an Employee Free Choice Act or any sort of legal reform through the NLRB is there's almost no chance of doing that. So we have to look not at changing law, but how we can work around it. And also, I mean, another major issue with the NLRB, coming from someone who worked there, is the punishment or the ramifications for breaking the law. I mean, often you have a company that commits an unfair labor practice, and what they do is they post a notice around their bulletin boards, around their office, and they maybe have to pay back workers if they went and, you know, fired all the union leaders. So really, you know, a rational company can look at the cost of blatantly violating the labor laws and say, you know what, we'll have to hang a few notices, we'll have to maybe pay some back pay for a few guys, but we'll keep the union out of our plant. And it makes sense for them to do it. And so that is something that we see often now, is companies blatantly violating labor laws. So with all that, that paints kind of a bleak picture, you know, things look pretty bad. However, on the bright side, this is a real exciting time to be part of the union movement, because in order to battle all of this, the union movement is having to shift from the traditional organizing model that we've been doing since, you know, the 20s and 30s, and adapt these situations. And what we do right now is going to have a huge impact on the future of labor in this country. So there are some very promising strategies that are coming up, some of which are going to be talked about today. For example, in SeaTac, they've got the minimum wage initiative. We've all seen how hard Alaska Airlines has been fighting that. And hopefully, we'll have a minimum wage initiative on the ballot in SeaTac this fall. At the same time, workers and residents of Seattle are pushing for a $15 an hour minimum wage, which is the same amount as the SeaTac workers are pushing for in their ballot initiative. It all comes together nicely, and of course there's unions in the background, but there's also community groups and different people getting involved, the workers, a lot of unrepresented people. And we've got the fast food strikes, where none of these guys are represented. This has always been an industry that's incredibly hard to organize because of high turnover, young workers, often minimum wage. which is difficult for organizing because, you know, one of the things when you get a union is you have to pay dues, and it's hard to pay dues on $9.15 an hour. So we also see, for example, with the UFCW, the Our Walmart campaign. You know, they've been fighting Walmart for years, and they've come to try to come in with a different approach. And so they have the Our Walmart thing, and for example, last week or 2 weeks ago, we saw the arrests in Renton at the protest. And now, so all of this is sort of going on, and then last week the AFL-CIO had its national convention in Los Angeles, and one of the things that came out of that was the AFL-CIO adopted resolutions that are going to embrace new methods of organizing and working with community groups and working to get benefits for all workers, not just those who are covered by union contracts and or in bargaining units. So we're seeing a shift now from the AFL-CIO, which is big, you know, that's 12 million workers in America belong to the AFL-CIO affiliated unions. And so this is really signaling a new direction for labor. And so they realized that with everything we're facing right now, the traditional union organizing model just simply isn't enough anymore, and that we need to find ways to get around all these difficulties, both legal, social, opinion. We've all seen how the opinion of labor unions has changed over the last several decades, and the brilliant job that our opponents have done in framing us as union thugs and, you know, saying that we're getting rich off of dues, which I can assure you isn't true. So in fighting all these things, we've realized we need to take a different approach. And so, as an example of that, I'll talk a little bit of what Organized Workers for Labor Solidarity did. It's a group I'm a member of in their Whole Foods campaign to support the striking workers at UNFI, United Natural Foods. So, a little bit of background on what was going on in this strike. So United Natural Foods operates a distribution center in Auburn, Washington, food distribution. It's all organic and natural foods, and their main business is that they supply Whole Foods with organic food products. So their biggest client is Whole Foods. Whole Foods' biggest distributor that they get their product from is United Natural Foods. So there's this real connection there. And so United Natural Foods also does a little bit, you know, supplying the various co-ops and, you know, natural food sections of regular grocery stores. So their employees are represented by Teamsters Local 117 here. And they were in contract bargaining in the fall and winter of 2012. And at the time, United Natural Foods workers were being paid 25% below the going rate for warehouse distribution work that was similar to theirs in other union shops like the Safeway distribution centers. Okay, I'm going to have to really hurry up. So, basically where I'm going with this is I was talking about ways to get around bad labor laws earlier. So, Section 8B4I2B of the National Labor Relations Act says that it is illegal for a union to start a secondary boycott. So what that means is, for example, you have Teamsters 117, you have United Natural Foods, and Teamsters represents the employees at United Natural Foods. Whole Foods is a customer of United Natural Foods. So in order to put United Natural Food, put pressure on UNFI, a secondary boycott would be to go to Whole Foods and say, don't buy anything from Whole Foods, put pressure on them so they tell UNFI, you know, get it together and get a contract. And so that's basically how a secondary boycott works. And that potentially is one of the strongest union weapons in either an organizing drive or a strike. So what OWLs realized and Teamsters realized, they couldn't call a secondary boycott. It would be illegal, you know. They would get a court order from the NLRB telling them to stop it and put up notices and all that. So Owls realized, hey, they're a community organization. We're not a union. We're not bound by the NLRA. We can call a boycott on whoever we want. We have First Amendment rights. So we did just that. We called a boycott on Whole Foods, saying, don't accept shipments from United Natural Foods. These are being brought to your store by replacement workers. And so we went out there and we picketed in front of the stores, and we tried to turn away customers, and we put stuff on our websites, and we held meetings, and we put a lot of pressure on Whole Foods, who didn't actually employ the workers who were on strike at United Natural Foods. Now, this really got Whole Foods' attention. I remember one day I came out to the picket line, and within a few minutes of standing there, someone came out in a Whole Foods apron and took a picture of me. So pretty soon what ended up happening was Whole Foods filed unfair labor practices against our little group, Owls, which was interesting. So when the NLRB got a hold of that, what they did was they went to Whole Foods and they said, Owls isn't a union, and they're not working with the Teamsters. See, that's where you would run into a problem. We couldn't work with the Teamsters or be seen as an agent of the Teamsters, like they were just using us as an end run around labor law. But we were our own separate individual thing. So the NLRB said, that's not an unfair labor practice, and you should probably withdraw this charge, and they ended up withdrawing it. Now, at the same time this was happening, Teamsters was running a full-scale campaign doing the regular traditional union work that they're allowed to do under labor law. And, the various co-ops were also helping out, and so all this other stuff was going on. So ultimately, we'll never know how much our boycott had to do with the final outcome, which was positive. But what it does show is that there are creative ways to get around these bad labor laws, and things that community organizations and groups that aren't unions can do alongside with unions to help gain some victories in this difficult climate. So with that, I will pass it on.
Thank you, Jason. That was very good. Good story. And good, I wrote down that labor law number. If anybody missed it, I got it down. All right.